Good morning, Knicks Nation. Raw Hebrew Remnant here. I wanted to discuss uh, a player that's a possibility for the Knicks, and I feel one of the better possibilities for us. One of the few restricted free agents that we actually can pursue. Now, before I get into it, this is on Bogdanovic of the Sacramento Kings. Now, before I get into it, I want to discuss just quickly some ancillary things. First, the revenue situation in the NBA. I just want to go over that real quick. The NBA is going to have substantially less revenues and has had actually substantially less revenues for this calendar year, not the fiscal year or the NBA season year, but this calendar year, 2020. And the reason is a multiple. So the NBA receives revenues from various sources. If you would notice, when you watch your NBA teams play, generally they have some sort of company logo on their uniforms. That's a source of revenue. That's advertising for whatever company they're repping on their uniforms. Then if you notice in the arenas, there's all kind of advertisements in the arenas. That's another source of revenue. It's advertising. Now, on advertising dollars like that, I think the NBA makes like $800 million a year from advertising dollars. Then there's, of course, the revenues that the NBA gets from television. Television, ESPN, ABC, signed $1 billion or at least $1 billion contract with the NBA and to televise their games. Then there's revenues the NBA gets from streaming games in other places, and this is a big one. China has approximately 500 million NBA fans, and the games get streamed in China. And the revenues from China between the streaming of the NBA games and the merchandising is anywhere where the minimum amount is 500 million, but it's been estimated to be as high as $4 billion a year for the NBA. You know, the NBA doesn't reveal exactly how much it is, so people are just estimating based on the number of people in China that are buying merchandise and streaming games. Then there's, of course, the revenues from fans that come to watch the games and things that get sold as a result of concession stands and all of that. And then, of course, aside from all that, there's sneaker companies. The NBA has a deal with Nike, had a deal before with Adidas, now has a deal with Nike. And see, these are multiple revenue streams that the NBA has during the season. Now, last year, that took a big hit. Number one, Daryl Morey, the GM for Houston, spoke out publicly against human rights abuses in China, and spoke for the public demonstrations against communism in China. That did not make the Chinese government happy, and they immediately shut down NBA revenue streams from China. That just for part of the season cost approximately $400 million of revenue to the NBA. And the commissioner has spoken and stated that they're expecting to get back on good graces with China. Of course, there'll have to be some policies made where, people are not speaking against China or government or about what their policies are. And China is also wanting to continue this business. They really shut it down hard earlier this year, but there's a lot of money involved for them. So, they are also interested in restoring and continuing that relationship. But even with that, even with the restoration of the Chinese relationship, the COVID situation has caused a loss of revenue on all of these fronts. So nobody's playing in the arenas, so there's no advertising dollars coming from those places. The games, not as many games are being played, so there's not as many games being streamed in a 500 million fan population in China, which is a huge hit. And of course, there's loss of revenues from this side of the pond as well, from just not having revenue from the games and the revenue from the sneaker companies and so on and so forth. Then, of course, there's the television revenue. which comes from games. And the NBA makes a lot more money, just like college. College basketball makes its money. The NCAA makes its money on the tournament, right? The NCAA tournament is the big money maker. And for the schools themselves, any school that gets into the tournament and advances, every game they play, I don't know how much money it is, but it's a lot of money they get for each game they play. And of course, when the final four teams get the most money. NBA is very similar. In the playoffs, the NBA gets a lot of revenue, a lot more revenue than it gets during the season. It gets in the playoffs, which is why a guy like a LeBron or anybody that's going to lead a team to the playoffs for the NBA is very important. Also, of course, Chinese players become very important, which is, a guy like Yao Ming. Now, Yao Ming averaged like 19 points, 9 rebounds a game for his career, and he was a very good player. I wouldn't say he was a Hall of Fame player. Right? But because of what he represents, because of the fan base in China, he was on the all-star team every year he was in the league, not because he was like the best player, but because of how many votes he was getting from China. Same with Jeremy Lin. Jeremy Lin is probably the biggest star in China, even bigger than Stephon Marbury. And that's why it's no coincidence that they're having problems with Chinese government in terms of their stand. And Jeremy Lin is talking about coming back to the NBA, right? That's no coincidence. So, these are all revenue streams that have been hurt either by the COVID or by Daryl Morey's comments about the Chinese government. And so the NBA bases the salary cap on its revenues. Okay. So the salary cap is based on revenue and teams share in the revenues. All a team has to do is produce, I think, 70% of the average revenue of an NBA team. So if whatever the average revenue is, if they produce 70% of it, they can share in all the other stuff that these streams of income from the NBA. So it's hundreds of millions of dollars per team. And so when you have a cut in those revenues because of lack of games, lack of streaming, lack of revenue from advertising, lack of TV revenue, and then, of course, lack of fan revenue because no fans are going to be at the games. Now you have a problem. See? So every game that is missed, in the NBA, you're missing hundreds of millions of dollars. So let's put it this way. Last year, instead of playing 82 games, the NBA played 62 games, right? Because of the COVID. And then the playoffs were not in arenas. They were in a bubble, right? And just on that, they lost $400 million. Okay. Plus the Chinese situation. So you can see that this coming season, they're trying to get it so that when they reopen the season, the NBA is hoping that they can reopen it and the teams will play in arenas because they'll make more money that way. Okay. They'll make much more money that way. So that's the issue. So that puts pressure on each team. It changes the financial picture for each team, particularly teams that are already over the cap or already in luxury tax territory. It changes their dynamic. Okay. And it changes the small market teams because they're not sharing in as much revenue as they would normally share in. They're getting us. The pie is smaller. So their piece of the pie is smaller. It helps the big market teams that are under the cap and under the salary cap and under the luxury tax, like the New York Knicks, because they have more cushion than the other teams. And not only that, they're in a bigger market. So that's why the Knicks have an advantage this year more than they would have in other years, strictly because of the loss of revenue and strictly because of the fact that the Knicks are under the cap. Okay. So with that being the case, as we've said before and we say now, the Knicks' biggest strength right now is cap space. Okay. And how do you use cap space as a weapon to improve your team? How do you use cap space as a weapon to improve your team? Well, there's a number of ways you can do that. You can do that by simply, of course, you can use your cap space to sign players to bigger contracts than they would otherwise not get, and that would otherwise may not come to your team because they're getting money to come to your team. And that's what most people, whenever I suggest trades or suggest players, people completely take that off the table. Like they say, why would this player come to New York? The New York stinks. Players want money. Not everybody's LeBron. Not everybody's got, going to get $40 million, $50 million, $100 million a year from advertising dollars. Like that. Most players are not getting that. Okay. So you're talking about really players like LeBron, Kawhi, Anthony Davis, Giannis Antetokounmpo with an international brand like Antetokounmpo and LeBron. They're going to get paid regardless. So they're not worried about where they're going to play, except they want to win a championship. But just about everybody else, they're looking for that bag. They don't care how stinky your team is. They want to get paid. Okay. So that's why we have an advantage. One of the ways we could use our cap space is to induce players we want to come play with us. That players that are available, not players that are not available. There's a difference between players available and players not available. We'll talk about that in a second. So then another way is you take on other teams' bad contracts with your cap space. Now, why would you do that? If you're a developing team, you do that to get additional draft picks, which you can use to build your team or to even trade for other players. That's what you do. So you take on a bad contract from another team, like they're talking about taking on a Chris Paul contract, or we talked about Al Horford's contract. Well, the reason you would do that is not because they're going to improve your team, although Chris Paul would probably improve our team. You're doing it to get draft picks that you can use to either draft players that are dynamic players or trade those picks for dynamic players. That's why you're doing it. Okay. Most people forget that. People that don't watch the whole video. Now, so now that brings us to Bogdanovic. The Knicks everybody's talking about the Knicks need for a point guard. I'm not with that. I'm a total Frank Ntilikina should start a point guard guy. I don't, that's it, period. So I'm not looking for a point guard. Okay. You might want to get a backup point guard, but I like Dennis Smith Jr. To me, as we talked about in another video, Dennis Smith Jr. is really not a point guard. He's really an off guard. He's really an attack guard that you want to bring off the bench as a shooter. We might want to get a DJ Augustine or something like that as a backup veteran to back up Frank. Okay. But Frank should be given the keys and let's run this thing this year and see what we got. So I'm not looking for no point guards, not in the draft, especially not this year in the draft, because next year we got a whole bunch of point guards that's better than anybody in the draft this year. So I'm not looking for a point guard, but we do need shooters. You want to put shooters around Frank. You want to put shooters around RJ. Okay. Cause that opens up the floor and these guys will be very good. Leon Rose had already stated publicly in his initial interview with Ian Begley that Frank will prosper in the right environment. What does he mean by that? That means you play him. First, you got to play him. And Tibbs is going to do that. And then secondly, you need some shooters around. You put some shooters around Frank Ntilikina. And Frank Ntilikina already, what most people don't know, and you can look this up. I put it, the link in another video, but if you wanted, I could give it to you. The NBA, he's already rated from his rookie year, the best pick and roll defender in the NBA. Did you hear what I said? The best pick and roll defender in the NBA. Frank Ntilikina. Okay? Okay? So, anyway. So, Bogdanovic is a shooter. Now, how do we use our cap space to obtain a shooter like Bogdanovic, especially a guy that's a restricted free agent? First off, let's look at the Kings cap situation. The Kings would have almost 19 or 18.5 million of cap space, but they're not going to have that. The reason they're not going to have that is because on their roster, there's a guy named Jabari Parker. Jabari Parker has a player option for 6.5 million. That takes away 6.5 million. That brings them down to about 12 million in cap space. Okay. 12 million. Also, Bogdanovic has a cap hold of almost $11 million. That's his cap hold. Okay. Now, Bogdanovic is 28 years old. Bogdanovic's only been in the league 2 years. He was playing in Serbia. He was a draft and stash. I think Phoenix drafted him, or somebody drafted him and stashed him, then ended up trading him to the Kings. So he only been in the league 2 years and he's 28 years old, but he shoots 37% as a career from the 3-point line. So he is on a cap hold of $11 million. Now, the situation gets complicated because not only does the Kings not have any cap space, or they will have 12 million of cap space basically to re-sign Bogdanovic, and they can exceed the cap if they want to. I don't think they're going to want to because of the revenue situation I outlined earlier. They're not going to want to exceed the cap if they don't have to. They're nowhere near the luxury tax, but they're not even a playoff team. They won 31 games last year. They don't want to exceed the cap if they don't have to. Last year, or this past season, they extended Buddy Hield for $106 million. Okay? They extended him for $106 million. Now, you don't extend the guy for $106 million and then sit him on the bench. And that's Luke Walton played Bogdanovic in front of Held, which pissed Held off. And right now, apparently, they're not even talking. Held don't even want to talk to Luke Walton. But this is business. So this year, Buddy's going to get $25 million to play. And he's going to be getting 106 over the next 4 years. He gets 25 this year. All right. So now they got a decision to make. They want to, everybody's saying in the NBA, the rumor is they want to trade Buddy Hield. And they want to re-sign Bogdanovic. But here's what we do if we're the Knicks. So they got Buddy Hield on their roster right now. He's signed. He's not a free agent. That's their player. Okay. Bogdanovic is a restricted free agent. I'm saying, let's offer Bogdanovic the bag and force the Kings to match, because that way they got to pay Buddy Hield and Bogdanovic. And they'll be in a more desperate situation to make a deal. Okay? So I'm saying, let's offer Bogdanovic, I would offer him 4 years, $64 million, $16 million a year. Okay? 4 years, $64 million. And let them. Now, I looked up, not that there's a projection site called Carmelo. It's not like Carmelo Anthony. It's just spelled Carmelo. I don't know why they did that, but it's from 538.com. And it projects several things about players, matching them up to a computer program that projects players against each other. It's not always 100% accurate, I will admit. But I looked up Bogdanovic, and one of the things they're pretty accurate about is their market value. Bogdanovic's market value is about $11 to $12 million a year. Between $10 and $12 million a year is what Carmelo projects that his market value is. So I'm saying we pay him 16. I mean, we're the Knicks. We can overpay a little. We got the money. So now the Kings have a decision to make. They could try to match that. If they do, they have both Buddy Hield and Bogdanovic on their roster. Both of them are not starting. They're both 28 years old. Okay. Actually, Buddy Hield's shooting numbers are a little bit better. But Bogdanovic is a better all-around team player, I think, than Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is a scorer, and a shooter. Buddy Hield is a better version. I would call him a rich man's version of Tim Hardaway. He's a more efficient shooter than Tim Hardaway. His game is very similar to Tim Hardaway Jr. But Bogdanovic is a better team player, and he shoots the ball just as well, and he comes cheaper. So I'm thinking we offer him 4 years. He just turned 28 in August, so we're getting him for his 28 season, 29, 30, and 31 season. So by the time the contract is over, he's 31, and he will help at the 2 spot. To me, you put Frank at the point, you put Bogdanovic at the 2, and you put RJ at the 3. Some people are like, RJ's not a 3, he's a 2. RJ did play the 2 last year. He did play the 2 last year. But anybody that watches him can see his future's at the 3. He's a wing, so he can play the 2 or the 3. He's like Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler does that. But Jimmy Butler plays the 3 most of the time. And we can see that's RJ's future. Just like Kevin Knox plays the 3 and the 4. But his real future is at the 4. That's his future. So you can see that. It's the same with RJ. RJ's future's at the 3. He could play the 2, but his future's at the 3. Okay. So with RJ, Bogdanovic, and Frank, and then Bogdanovic has a 6'11" wingspan. Okay. I don't know what kind of defender he is. He's not rated as a high defender, but in Tibbs' system with that wingspan, I think we'll be in pretty good shape with that wing and point guard defensively. All right. So when you put pressure on the Kings to match, and you might even put a no trade kicker or a trade kicker in there so that they have to match that. They're a small market team. You use your money to force them into a situation. Because now if they re-sign Bogdanovic, if they match the contract, we might be able to then talk about Buddy Hield. But we're not giving up draft picks for Buddy Hield because they're the ones that need to get that money off their books. See, We would like to. I always been saying in all my videos when we talk about Julius Randle, why Julius Randle is really a third option and doesn't fit as a first option on the Knicks. And that would be my preferred situation would be to not have Julius Randle on the team because of that. I'm not saying, again, I'm always telling you, I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm just saying he's a third option. He's a good third option. Okay. But I'll keep Julius Randle rather than give up with all these people on crack like Mark Berman talking about giving up. Mark Berman act like those 2021 draft picks are in his pocket and burning a hole in his pocket, like a crackhead with $20 in his pocket looking for a rock, and he's willing to toss them anywhere with anybody. It's stupid. But, anyway, it's crazy season. So you're going to get people like Berman and Bondi and other people like that. And Isola writing really idiotic things about stupid moves the Knicks are supposed to make. And the thing is that kills me about what Berman said is, if they did one of those dumb moves, right? Let's say they gave away their 2 draft picks and in 2021, this guy was talking about a draft pick in 2021 is Dennis Smith Jr. and okay. So let's say we did that. And we give Indiana one of our Dallas picks in 2021. Okay. And then Indiana picks a stud, a superstar in the draft. Berman would be the guy that 2 years from now is writing how stupid that was for the Knicks to do after he wrote the Knicks should do it. That's the type of guy we're dealing with. That's the type of media we have in New York. It's crazy. So anyway, Bogdanovic, $16 million a year, put that offer out there. It's not time yet. I don't know when they can start making these offers, but put that offer out there. Let the Kings try to match it. Maybe put a 15% trade kicker or something in there. And we keep this kid for 4 years. We got our 2 guard. Okay. We got our 2 guard. And if they match it, then they definitely want to get rid of Buddy Hield. Then we can trade Julius Randle for Buddy Hield. And I want one of their draft picks. we're not even having it. So I want a future draft pick or a first rounder or something. I don't even know what they got this year. What kind of draft picks they got? Let me see what they got this year. They have, cause I'm not even having it. We're not giving up draft picks. When we got the financial advantage, it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. See, the worst case scenario for the Knicks, this is the worst case scenario for the Knicks. So they got a 2020 draft pick. I'm not sure. I forgot where they're drafting, but they got a 2020 draft pick. We can take that, or we can take their 2021, whatever. But one thing for the Knicks, the worst case scenario is that we come back with our team that we had last year. I mean, you take away all of those, you let all those guys go that are optional contracts. You don't exercise those options. Let them all go. And you might keep one. Like some people want to keep Bobby Portis, or you might keep Taj because he's a Tibbs guy or whatever. But you let most of those guys go and you come back with your young team. That's the worst case scenario. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm not giving up future draft picks for players that may not even fit our timeline. Like I love CP3, but he doesn't fit the timeline. And forget, what's this other guy? Paul George? They gotta be crazy. What? No. Okay. And then Victor Oladipo, a former All-Star that played this past year in the bubble on one leg. And he's looking for a max. Are you kidding me? I mean, really? So, no. And they talking about us giving them draft picks? Keep our draft picks. You let people come to us. We got the space. We don't need to go to anybody. See, that's the thing. We shouldn't be we should be letting people call us. We don't need to be calling nobody. We call in agents. And that's another thing I want to bring up before we end the video. Look, the situation we're now in with young players that we want to develop in a changing culture is you want to look first at free agents before you look at trades. You want free agents. Because free agency, whether it's a restricted free agent like Bogdanovic, or whether it's an unrestricted free agent like a Jeremy Grant or a Christian Wood, the thing about free agents is you're not giving up anything except money to get them. And we got money. Okay? You're not trading anybody to get a free agent. That's what a lot of people don't understand that. Well, maybe we can trade Julius Randle and get Jeremy Grant. You don't need to trade anybody. Jeremy Grant is an unrestricted free agent. You don't need to trade anybody. And we don't even need to do sign-in trades. Don't need to do that. You only do sign-in trades with a top-tier player like a Kevin Durant. That's what they did a sign-in trade for him for. You don't do sign-in trades for second-tier guys. Okay? You can offer money. So the first thing we want to do is look at the free agents and the restricted free agents that's not costing us any assets. It's just costing us money. And we got money. All right? So if we have the $45 million in cash space, we got plenty of money. So if we offer Bogdanovic $16 million or even $17 million a year, we still got $28 million in cap space. We could still go out and get a Jeremy Grant. We could still go out and get a Christian Wood. We could still offer them the bag. Okay. Now this is another thing. We're going to talk about Jeremy Grant in another video, but I heard some things about Grant. We'll come back to that in another video. But see, so we look at the free agent list first. And for the Knicks, again, we're not looking at top tier players. We're not on the parking lot to be looking at Mercedes-Benzes right now. We need Hondas and Toyotas. We need solid players that could come in and fit the timeline, or at least if they don't fit the timeline, like Gallinari doesn't fit the timeline, but can help our players along by opening up the floor. Okay? That's what we're talking about. So there's a lot of possibilities for the Knicks. If we get Obi Toppin in the draft, again, Vassell's my top guy, but a lot of people like Obi, and I don't mind Obi, but if we got Obi Toppin in the draft, now you put him in at the 4, and you don't need to go get a stretch 4 because you got a guy, right? But if you do get Vassell, you can get a Bogdanovic, you can get a Jeremy Grant, or you can get a Christian Wood, or you can get somebody else at the 4 spot that you can play and bring Vassell off the bench behind Bogdanovic. You could do that. Okay. So we have a lot of options. Let us always remember this year, the Knicks are at an advantage because we got the money and players want money. Shalom.